First of 3 videos on the Olympics, and essentially in this video what we're going to look at is a part of the specification which looks at the development or the background of the Olympic Games, particularly in the context of Baron Pierre de Coubertin, French chappie, looking at the principles and aims, the vision that was embedded in the Olympic Games, why it was originally reinstated, and then lastly a couple of the key organisations in terms of being in control of and linked to the Olympics. So firstly then, the background and the evolution of the Olympic Games, and particularly Pierre de Coubertin's vision and dream for the Olympics. Now, he was a very influential French educated and educator of young men, very keen on sport, and he basically wanted something which would motivate, drive, educate, and give very positive qualities to young French men. And he went through a process of exploring the possibilities, and ultimately he succeeded in reinventing or reinstating the Olympics in the Athens 1986 Games. So that was the first of the modern Olympic Games, and in that Games, or in that first occasion, there were merely 211 male athletes from about 14 different countries, and they did 43 events, and that clearly is vastly different from the Olympics that you'll have watched in 2012 recently. So the Olympics, the ancient games, is where it all started in the first place, back in Greece, where whilst there is some similarities in some of the activities, the marathon was actually run between 2 cities, and the guy that ran that distance, I believe he died in the end in completion, but that was the sort of the motivation behind the marathon event. And a lot of the ancient Olympic Games you can recognise in some of the current anyway, the javelin is another example. That would have obviously been a spear in history. Now, Pierre de Coubertin was influenced by several factors in terms of his drive and what he did to reinstate the Games. One of them, though he didn't meet this person, he learnt about the Cotswold Olympic Games. Now, the Cotswold Games, Cotswold Olympics, were started way back in 1612 by a guy called Robert Dover, and he founded, that also known as the Cotswold Games. He founded this event, and it was essentially the first sporting events which had multiple activities involved in it. So it's very a couple of 100 years before the Olympic Games were reinstated, but it was significant in that it was a multi-sport event. It's sometimes also called the Dover Games. However, these games were stopped at one point. So in 1852 they were stopped because the activities became too rowdy, too dangerous, probably too much to do with celebration and alcohol, though they were revived and restarted again in 1980, and they carry on every year. So you can see this poster promoting those games is the 2012 Olympic Games. So each June in a place called Chipping Campden, these games take place. Also, Pierre de Coubertin visited the British public schools, and we know from previous sections that within these public schools there's this games obsession, the games ethic, and very much a positive ethos in response to these games, because they brought about really positive qualities in the young men, such as leadership, sportsmanship, and of course muscular Christianity. And de Coubertin really recognised and appreciated these values, and he wished this for the young men of France. Finally then, he went to visit Dr. William Penny Brooks at a place called Much Wenlock. Now, Dr. Penny Brooks, or William, had basically created the Much Wenlock Games, started in 1880, and they still carry on every year. And he was a medical doctor, and actually the reason why he started these games, these local activities, was to promote the health of the townspeople. So they would get together very much in a fete setup, but they would take part in some physical activities in a bid to promote their health. And you can see that there's some similar but also some variations in the sorts of activities that they did there. And in 1889, de Coubertin went to visit William Penny Brooks, and they had massive discussions and they shared their visions and their hopes for what could come about. And you can see here that some of the activities, again, are a little bit different from the activities we'd see at our modern Olympic Games. But nonetheless, it brought the community together, and the qualities that the participants experienced were all very positive. So there we have it. Brooks and de Coubertin combined their efforts and really pushed forward, and they succeeded because in 1896, as we've said already, the modern Olympic Games were reinvented or reinstated in Athens, symbolically, because obviously the ancient games occurred in Athens. However, poor Dr. Brooks actually died 4 months before those games occurred, so he'd been very much a part of pushing and creating them, but unfortunately passed away. And here's just an exam question asking for the outline, or to outline the background of the modern Olympic Games, and you can see the points that are listed here is essentially what I've just talked through. So now, some of the critical bits underpinning the games in terms of philosophy, really. So Pierre de Coubertin very much believed that the most important thing in terms of the Olympic Games wasn't winning, but was taking part, wasn't the triumph, but the struggle, wasn't to conquer somebody else, but to have fought well. So he was very much about the experience and about the quality and about the drive and the effort, rather than about the outcome. That was his philosophy. He aimed then to give sport status and keep people interested in sport, to educate people and observers, the participants and the observers, to recognise quality and skill and prowess, to appreciate it, but particularly to show the true spirit of sportsmanship and fair play. This was really important to him. And to bring people from different nations together. Really powerful aims. That's what he believed in. Some of the principles then behind the Olympic Games were combining sort of spirituality and physicality, to show effort, to give effort, to be a role model, to educate and inspire other people through sport, to be tolerant, generous, to be united, to show friendship to people, to respect and to not discriminate. Basically promoting peace and interaction and harmony between different peoples. Really, again, powerful principles. And then 6 goals of the Olympic Games: personal excellence, mass participation, educating through sport, fair play, really important, sharing different cultures and respecting different cultures and understanding different nations, very significant. Now, these things you probably will recognise. There is an Olympic motto. It's Citius, Altius, Fortius, and that means faster, higher, stronger. There's an Olympic Charter, and this basically is a set of rules and guidelines and expectations that dictate how participants, and it's almost like the rule book associated with the Olympics. This sets down how things should be and what things aren't allowed. The Olympic rings, of course, the 5 continents symbolised by each ring on a white background, which is to symbolise peace. And the Olympic oath. Every Olympic Games, there's a representative of all the participants, all the officials, and of all the coaches, and you can see there, one at a time, they will pledge, holding on to the Olympic flag, to participate without cheating and being fair and with the right spirit and sportsmanship. So again, very powerful symbols of what the Olympics should stand for. And now lastly, just to look at the 2 organisations which are central to the Olympic Games: the International Olympic Committee. So this is the big, broad umbrella organisation that oversees the Olympic Games every single cycle of the Olympic process. Now, they are international. It's non-governmental, so it's nothing to do with any particular government, and it's not for profit. It's essentially perpetuating and using any money it gets just to fulfill its function. So it is not there to make money. The money that it does use in terms of organising the Olympic Games is gained from the marketing and the television rights. In order for each country to publicise the Olympic Games, they pay loads of money, and this is what the IAC get as income. The members of the committee are, again, they're neutral. They're not representing their country. It could be that some are athletes, some are administrative, some are lawyers, some are journalists. So it's a real mix of people. And as I said there, they don't actually represent a country, their country. They are ambassadors representing the IOC, so they are absolutely neutral and unbiased. This sometimes comes up in exam questions. The IOC does supervise the organisation of the Winter and Summer Games and links very much with the national organisations to do that. They manage commercialisation. Now, later in a video, we'll look at how the commercialised the Olympics is or isn't, but the IOC is in theory supposed to monitor and control how commercial the games are, so that it's not exploited and taken advantage of. They make decisions about the future of the game, so who has the next games. They support the National Olympic Committees, so the BOA is the British Olympic Committee, and so when we hosted 2012, the IOC supported our BOA and made it an amazing games. And lastly, they're there to educate and be sure of environmental issues. So, for example, in Beijing, they were insisting that something was done about the pollution in the city before the games took place, for everybody's health, of course. However, this is a little bit of a facetious cartoon, which kind of implies that maybe there's a little bit of maybe they're not as neutral as perhaps they should be. So, what's being applied for one country or one performer might not be the same for another, but that's a little bit of a political agenda as an underlying theme there. And the IOC has different areas of work, so it's very much interested in the sports science, doping and taking drugs and deviant cheating, basically, promoting women in sport, educating everybody about the Olympic ideals and the philosophy, promoting sport for all, as we said already, promoting environmental and ensuring environmental factors are considered, and supporting and supervising each national agency. So this is our national agency, and whilst there's a handful of things that they are responsible for, it might be worth picking 5 that you can remember and learning those. So the British Olympic Association is our country's national Olympic Association, and they run the Olympic Medal Institute, which supports athletes medically and helps them recover from injury. They give employment advice to Olympians and Paralympians. Obviously, they have a timescale on their performing career. They promote facilities and give financial support. Again, there's an athlete medical scheme to, again, support injured performers. They plan workshops, they negotiate and support performers to go and be speakers for various conferences, so they get some other income. They will organise specific training sessions, so winter training sessions in other warm locations. There's an Olympic training centre in Austria, for example. And then there's a charity side of it, trying to raise the profile and understanding. So the British Olympic Foundation is there to raise the profile of the British Olympic Association and the Olympics in general.